Okay, hi sustainers. This is just another short video, hopefully short, just to talk a little bit about how story mode works and help you with your storytelling. We didn't get into that much in the last video, which is a copy of the tutorial. So hopefully this will help a little bit. I might also throw in a few other things just to kind of clean up the model a little bit. So we'll start here. This is the model from the 3 p.m. tutorial on, I don't know what day. Right, okay, so that was on Thursday, February 2nd, the 3 p.m. tutorial. So first what I'll do is I'll take this model and I'll clone it so I can start working on the new one. And do I want to clone it? Clone. And here it is. So our main goal here is storytelling mode. So let's begin with that. I'm going to edit the story. So here we have our story designer. It is enabled and is set to start for non-editors as soon as they enter the model. So in the tutorial, we got this far that we set up how to run figure 16, which just is the command press button, notice capital B, and then find name figure 16. Notice that's all together. And as I mentioned in the tutorial, these quotes matter, the brackets matter, the semicolon matters, everything matters. You have to be very exact in how you do things when you're writing this code. If you want to know more about how to write this code, it's JavaScript, and there is something called an API, which is kind of a manual to tell you how to do things, but it's very brief. I'll just show it to you. So here's the manual, and it's very long, or it appears to be very long, so you'd think that's very useful. But you have to kind of know how to use it before you can actually use it. So it doesn't actually function well as a tutorial. It's more a reminder. So for example, we've got here the command run model, and here's what it tells you about it. It tells you that it's a function. You can put stuff in behind the brackets. Tells you what those things that you put in the brackets have to be. It tells you when you run the model, call the function, what the function returns, which we haven't talked about yet. So if you're not familiar with that, that's okay. And then it gives you an example, but it's very tight, very compressed data. It's not something you can use to just kind of build your own thing if you don't know how to do it already. This really is just a reminder in case you're forgetting the details of how something like this works. So it won't really help us a lot. So hopefully this video will help you with some of the basics. Okay, so we're back in the story designer, and we're looking at the figure 16 group of steps. Let's create another group, and let's call it the beginning. That's probably a good descriptive name. You'll notice that it didn't end up being where I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be in the beginning. Wait a minute, does beginning have two ends? Yes, two ends together. So this group step called the beginning, I wanted it to be at the very front, but it's not. It's wrapped up inside this group step here called figure 16. That's okay. We can move these things around. So wherever you create it, that's all right. So I'll just grab this and I'll move it up. And when I see this thin little dotted line, I know it's going to drop it above figure 16. There. So that moved it. And I could try and move it down too. Notice that when you move something down, it usually drops into the group step that is above it. And that's not really what we want here. So generally, it's better to move things up like that. And if I wanted to move figure 16 up, I'd move it up like that and move it up. Okay, so that's just something that could get you kind of screwed up if you don't know how to handle it. So what do we want to do in the beginning? We should describe the model a little bit, tell the user what's coming. So we'll just start with the message. And over here is some nice handy text we could use from Meadows. And I'm just going to make it very clear that this is quoted text. I don't want to give the impression that I wrote this myself. So I'll just use the reference to the book. Here's a link to the book that I can use. So I've just grabbed that URL, and let's go back here. So there, we've got the text that we could use, and let's insert a link. I just pasted that in. Let me make that clear. So I pasted that. And if we say apply, then we can see how that works. Let's view the story. And there we go. We've got the story. We've got our link. If somebody wants that link, then they can find the book. And as you'll recall, I had figure 16 set up to run after that first group step. So when I click on the step forward button, then we should see what happens when we run the scenario for figure 16. And indeed we do. So that's good. So let's exit the story as I just did. Remember to exit your stories because you can't save changes that you're making while you're in story mode. So be very careful there. Don't start doing a bunch of editing and while you're still in story mode, and then you close the story mode and you lose all of those changes. So make sure you're not editing your story or viewing your story. And then trying to make changes. Let me give you a demonstration of how that can go wrong. So let's say I'm in story mode and I forget that I'm in story mode. And so I click on something and maybe I just want to delete it and I intend not to use it anymore. And then I'm all done. So I think, okay, that's good. And then maybe later on I notice that, oh, I'm in story mode. Let's exit that. What the heck? This thing's back. And that's because it doesn't save the things you're doing in story mode. Okay, so let's continue with story mode. So let's see, what do we want to do? I think we should add another message, maybe before figure 16. So I'll add another group step just to be clear. Oh, look, I put it in the wrong spot again, but I know how to fix that, right? We just drag it up so it's above that, and that's good. And if that didn't land in the right spot, keep dragging things around until they do. And let's call this figure 15 because I'm planning to put in a little bit of a description about figure 15. And I'm going to borrow this because I'm going to reuse it. So let's add step, show message, and I'll paste that in. And what the message will be is maybe all of that. So I can copy that and paste it, pretty it up. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of a page turn between the text. At the very beginning, we don't know exactly what's showing and what's not showing. So maybe just to be consistent, let's turn all the elements on 100% opacity. So they are opaque or visible. And we'll say leave blank to apply to all. So we're making all the primitives visible. We're showing our first message. Then we're going to show our second message. And then we'll run the simulation by pressing button figure 16 and show another message. So let's move on to the actions for figure 16. So I've got this text in here right now. Let's change that. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to change it to. I want this again, just to emphasize that I'm going to be using Meadows' words. And I'm looking at this paragraph here. I think this would be useful. Just have to pretty it up a little bit. Okay, so that looks good to me. The only thing I might add is we're trying to emphasize what's important in this figure 16 part of things here. So maybe we should actually change the visibility of some of these elements. So it says here, this straightforward stock maintaining balancing feedback loop is shown on the left side of figure 15. So maybe we should get rid of everything that's not part of that part of the story. So let's do that with a visibility change. And let's do that change before we run the simulation. And maybe we don't completely turn everything off. We just make it dim. And let's choose what we want to turn off. We want to leave the stuff on the left-hand side. So that's everything here because that's important to figure 16. But in figure 16, there's no heat loss to outside. So that element and that one, and these other few. Notice what I'm doing here. I'm clicking on the primitive and then I say add from diagram. That's an easy way to choose the right ones, especially when you get to these links where they're all called the same thing. It's really hard to choose them from this dropdown. You don't know which one is which. But here we know which one we have selected, so we can say add from diagram. And I think that's everything. We got the discrepancy, we got the outside temperature, we have the heat to outside, and we have 3 links, and probably this is the right ones. So once we're happy with how everything looks here in the story designer, we can say apply, and then we should view our story. Notice that this has been saving all the time. It's grayed out. It says saved. That means everything is saved, and we won't lose any work if our browser crashes or whatever. Okay, let's view the story. So there's the text we put in, copied from Meadows, and there's some more. This is pretty big. We might want to break this up into 2 pages or something, because if you have a very small window, then it might screw up the display. But besides that, everything looks good to me. Let's just check that visibility. We can kind of see it. You see how all this stuff is emphasized, and this stuff it's still there. You can still see it, but it's clearly not meant to be the focus of our attention right now. And let's exit the story. So what else should we do? A couple things that maybe I'll just add because they're kind of important. For one thing, we need some acknowledgements. That's huge. I'm going to change that to be something, well, maybe an 18 and maybe not underlined. Apparently, you can spell acknowledgements with or without an E here. I think this is the Canadian spelling. I'm not sure. So for our acknowledgements, let's see. Do I still have? No, I don't. I want to copy what I had before. from the story, this link. So I just copy that, and then in the acknowledgements, I say thanks. So there's the text, and I'll just apply that. Maybe I should also throw it in here to make sure it's visible. And maybe here I'll just take some more. So, okay, now I've added some text to the description. It's borrowed from Meadows again. I've got the link for acknowledgements. I should probably change the insight title. So what have we got? 15 to 16. That makes it pretty clear, I think. Maybe I'll also add another text field at top here just to make it super clear. So I think that's pretty good. And maybe a little bit more. So what I imagine here is we'll borrow the text from Meadows, the caption. There we go. So I hope this makes it clear how to use story mode, especially with buttons. Remember the very first command we had in our story was this run action, which actually presses a button. So we can put all our code for what we want the button to do, what we want it to change, and what simulation we want to run, which scenario basically. We can put that all in the button, and then we don't have to change it all in the story. We just change it in the button, and the story just presses the button. Okay, I hope that helped a little bit. I also cleaned up a little bit to show some of the more kind of descriptive elements of this model. The acknowledgements. I wanted to make sure everything was labeled carefully, and so it was very clear where the source for this model is. Maybe just for consistency, let me grab this text here and add it as a note to button 16. That way, if anybody wants to, they can see what figure 16 does. I see it says figure 16 twice. Just because I'm kind of anal about these things, I have to change that. There, remove one of those. There. Now we've got a caption that the user can see, view before they even push the button. And when they do push the button, that's what they see. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I'll post this on YouTube, and you can try it for yourself.